everyone, and welcome back to the last video in the DI playlist. We've learned a lot so far and you've done a great job in diving deep into dependency injection with examples in iOS specifically. So today we'll be wrapping up the playlist with the last topic, which is very important as well, which is object lifetime, and we will get to it in a minute. However, as a recap, I'd like to point out the example from the composition root. So as you remember, we had a profile view controller. If you tap on it, you go to logout, and then from logout, you can go to initial. From initial, you can come back to profile view controller. So let me demonstrate it in the app itself. And here's the simulator. Whenever we tap on logout, it goes to the logout view controller. Tapping on yes would simulate logout, and then we're shown the profile VC, initial VC, and then by tapping on show profile, would go back to the profile view controller. So code is very simple. We would hold a reference to the navigation controller, set it as a root view controller, and then whenever we call start profile VC, it just creates profile view controller, injects loader, avatar loader, user loader, and then injects the closure to show the next screen, and then sets the view controller stack to be profile VC, and of course animates. Whenever logout VC, the button is tapped, it would actually call this method, and it would create logout view controller, push the view controller to the stack because we can go back, and it would inject the logout VC, logout service, and then it would also inject the closure, which is start initial VC. And start initial VC would basically create initial view controller, pass show profile VC closure as the first method, and then it kind of allows us to implement this recursive navigation, and it would just replace the entire view controller stack as we've seen. So the purpose of demonstrating this exact code is that we would actually focus on the same exact code, but it is split a little bit, and let me show you what do I mean by that. So this is actually a different project, and as you can see, code is even simpler than we had earlier in composition root project. And now we actually just, again, hold reference to the navigation controller, create a factory, we create the coordinator. So we inject the services and loaders into factory, and then we create a coordinator, inject the navigation controller in the factory, and then we start the coordinator. So we've just kind of refactored the scene delegate into smaller components so that scene delegate is also small, because as we've discussed in composition root, if you haven't seen that video, make sure to check it out because that's very important. So composition root doesn't have to be large. Scene delegate was getting quite complex, but it doesn't have to. We can still split scene delegate into smaller components, into smaller classes, as we've done here. So let's see what's going on. So main coordinator is actually a class that handles navigation. So earlier it was done solely inside scene delegate, but here we have a dedicated component that's dealing with navigation. So we inject the navigation controller in the factory, and whenever we call start, it just asks factory to get the view controller, and it passes the closure as well to show the logout view controller, replace this to stack, and whenever this method is called, it actually asks factory to get the logout view controller, passes the closure again, and this is the show initial VC. In initial VC, it asks factory to get the initial view controller, and also passes the start method, and this is how we can achieve the recursive navigation. So the interesting part here is the factory, which is an abstract factory because it's just a protocol, which is a polymorphic interface. So app factory contains 3 methods, and we just inject different closures depending on the context, and we return UI view controller. So the reason for returning UI view controller is because every view controller subclass is a UI view controller. Thus, coordinator is also not coupled with concrete type of the view controller. Thus, it would be very easy to, let's say, change initial view controller to return profile or profile to return initial VC. This is basically done for flexibility purposes and to decouple coordinator from concrete type of the view controller. In make initial view controller, again, just creates the view controller, injects the closure, and returns it, so that coordinator could set it in the navigation stack. And profile view controller and logout view controller are doing exactly the same job. So we've actually, how to put it, split up the responsibility from scene delegate into coordinator and factory. So these two, main coordinator and factory, are collaborators to spin the recursive navigation, basically. If we see the app itself, it's basically the same functionality. Log out, then you tap yes, it goes to initial, and from initial you can go back to profile. You see nothing extraordinary here. But I'd like to point out the lifetime of objects here. So since the topic is object lifetime, so what is actually object lifetime? Object lifetime states that since we are creating everything in a composition root, we can also control lifetime of dependencies. So by the lifetime, I mean that how long component would be in memory, because we create everything in a composition root. We have full control of whenever we can get rid of the object, we can hold reference to the object and do whatever we need. So the first thing I'd like to kind of make sure that you pay attention to is a singleton lifestyle. So it's not a singleton pattern, but it's called a singleton lifestyle. But what do I mean by a singleton lifestyle? So singleton lifestyle says that the same object would be kept in memory and we can share that object. However, consumers have no idea whether the same object is shared, like single object can be shared between multiple components. So as you can see, we hold the reference to the navigation controller at all times. So by meaning at all times, I mean that scene delegate would be in memory until you run the app, right? So whenever you close the app, it would go out of memory. So navigation controller has the same lifetime as the scene delegate. And since scene delegate is instantiated only once per app run, so same as navigation controller. So navigation controller would be in memory until we kill the app and we remove the app from memory. So this is the first lifestyle that we are discussing here. And by saying that components or consumers have no idea whether this object is a single, is only one per application, is because whenever I inject to the coordinator, it has no idea what kind of navigation controller it's getting. We might create it during the scope of the scene will connect to session and do whatever we need. But as you can see, I'm holding a reference to the navigation controller so that everything doesn't get deallocated immediately, because Swift's arc works this way. So let's talk about the second lifestyle that we have in the concept of object lifetime. So the second one is a scoped lifetime. So main coordinator and factory are alive until we kind of tell them to do, right? So we could basically remove them from memory on demand. But the interesting point here is that they can also be shared. So they are not singleton lifestyles, because we're not holding reference to both of them at all times as we are holding reference to the navigation controller. But factory and coordinator are actually scoped, because we could have a factory and we could pass it to some other coordinator so that it would do some bunch of stuff. And even though we are sharing factory between two coordinators, we're not holding a reference to the factory at all times. That's why it's not singleton, but it is scoped, because it's scoped to the lifetime of the objects that it belongs to. Since we are creating main coordinator inside the scope of the scene will connect to session, these two have the same lifestyle, and we could get rid of them on demand or like whenever we wish, if there is a use case for that, of course. And the last thing that I'm willing to discuss is transient lifestyle. So by transient, I mean that if you go to the main coordinator, whenever start is called, it asks factory on demand that I need this view controller. And if we spin the app, start and show logout and show initial VC are called whenever we tap on a button, right? So by transient, I mean that the, how to put it, the lifetime of the object is constrained to this method. And of course, it's not that true because navigation controller holds reference to the array of view controllers. But like, let's say, since we are creating it in a very small scope, and where we cannot pass this view controller to some other context, this is why the lifestyle is basically transient. And if we go to the profile view controller, make profile view controller method, it actually creates it on demand. So let me put a breakpoint and demonstrate it to you. So since I just run the app, it actually calls start, and we get the new instance of profile VC, right? And whenever I tap logout, it would actually get me a new instance of show logout of logout view controller. And whenever I tap yes, it would also get new instance of initial view controller. So whenever I tap on a button, I would always get a new instance. That's why it's called a transient lifestyle, because its scope is very limited, and that's actually it about object lifetime. So most people would be saying like we can achieve the same functionality by using DI containers, and of course you're truly right. But if you are using DI container, they actually provide all of those keywords like singleton, transient, or scoped. And even though you might be using DI container, you might not exactly understand how they work under the hood. But this video actually demonstrates you 3 different object lifetimes, which are singleton, scoped, and transient. So singleton lifestyle lives like until the application dies, as we have here, navigation controller. We are holding reference to the navigation controller at all times. However, consumers have no idea whether this object is shared, it's the same one, or like whatever. It could be a singleton, which is a singleton pattern, and it would be like totally fine. The second one is the scope that we've discussed, and its lifetime is less than singleton, but like it still can be shared between components, but like components still have no idea whether these objects are shared or not. But we do not hold reference to these objects at all times. So this is the main difference between singleton lifestyle and scoped lifestyle. And the transient one is actually created always on demand, and its scope is very limited. As you can see, whenever we call start, we always get new instance of profile view controller. Whenever we tap on logout, we always get the new instance of logout view controller. And whenever we tap on yes to logout from the app, we get the initial view controller, and this is again a new instance of initial view controller. And the last thing I wanted to point out is that since we are injecting loaders to the factory, these also have a scoped lifestyle, because in a scene delegate, we are actually creating them and passing them to the factory. However, we could actually hold reference at all times to these objects and pass them to the factory. So let's do it. So I've created 3 properties inside scene delegate so that it holds reference to all of them at all times. So basically, avatar loader, user loader, and logout service have singleton lifestyle here. However, we are creating those services and loaders during the initialization of the scene delegate in scene will connect to session method. And these also have a scoped lifetime. However, we can easily change it by replacing these instances with our own that we've defined right there on top. And this is how it's easy to control lifetime of objects in the composition root. So, and again, composition root doesn't have to be large. And most probably, even in a large scale, very complex app, you would not hold reference to like hundreds of objects or hundreds of components inside your scene delegate, app delegate, or whatever. So this is how we could have changed from scoped lifestyle, since avatar loader, user loader, and logout service were having the same scope as the factory, and factor was having the same scope as the coordinator. But like it's very easy to flip that from scoped to Singleton lifestyle. And I believe this would be it for this video and for this playlist. I enjoyed making videos for all of you, and if you really loved it, make sure to leave a comment with the feedback. Make sure to subscribe and like this video. It helps me immensely. And I guess that would be it for this video and playlist in general. And thanks a lot again for watching.